Good morning. This is a Devar Torah on Parashat Vayeishev. This is another one of these turning points in Sefer Bereshit. The last two parshas were focusing on Yaakov. The remaining parshas of the Chumash will be referring last third of the Chumash Bereshit, book of Bereshit. We'll be focusing on Yosef and to a lesser extent his brothers, all of whom can jointly make up the 12 tribes of Bnei Israel. Now, this parsha begins with saying that Yaakov wanted to settle in Israel, in the Eretz Canaan. Now, the question, why did he have to tell us this? And what is one of the messages that's being given? And if we look, it says it doesn't have a vav, which we connected to the previous parsha. What was the end of the previous parsha? Was that Esav got his land. He couldn't be in Eretz Canaan. He went to Mount Seir, and rather than settling there, he literally took it over, conquered it, and as I spoke in last week's parsha, that eventually evolved into Edom and Rome and all the countries that had derived from that. Now, different with Yaakov, it doesn't say he's going to conquer it, take it over. Yeshev, even though it's God's promise to him and to Abraham and Yitzchak before him, he's acting like he's a sojourner, that he's a visitor, a lodger, but not the owner. We saw that also with Abraham, which was one of the disputes between him and Lot. Abraham said that the sheep could not eat off the land, certain lands, because they did not yet belong to him, while Lot's shepherds thought they did. In any event, he settles, and then the next thing it says, these are told us, the chronicles of the generations of Yaakov, and they mention Yosef. And one of the questions they're going to be addressing a little later is, what does it say Yosef? When we had this before, it described everybody who was there. Why suddenly are we just saying him? Why not the whole 12 tribes? And why do we even have to mention Yosef? And why he's 17? Because if you look at it, we already listed in the previous parsha where it says Yaakov had 12 sons, and he lists who their mothers and which mothers had which sons. So why is the repetition all? Nothing in the Torah is repeated. The parsha then goes on to describe Yaakov sending Yosef, who is hated by his brothers for his dreams and for his tattling on him, and they decide they're going to kill him. Instead, they throw him in a bore, which they say is empty. Why is it empty? It means empty of water, but not of snakes and scorpions, and only through a miracle from Hashem does he even survive it. He's then found by the Bnei Ishmael, and who sell him to the Midianites, who sell him down and take him down to Egypt and sell him as a slave. And who is he sold to? He sold to somebody named Potiphar, who's the chief butcher of Pharaoh in terms of meat. And the parsha then switches to Yehuda. Yehuda is so disgusted he separates from them. He eventually meets a wife down there, has 3 sons. She then dies. Now he marries his oldest son to somebody named Tamar, a woman who was the daughter of a merchant. And the first son dies because of a personal sin he commits. Then Onan, for slightly different reasons, commits a similar sin, and he's killed. And Yehuda is very afraid to give his third son, when he grows up, for Tamar to be a wife to do Yibum, so that the souls of the other two will be brought back. And when Tamar sees that, and she realizes that people who are ultimately going to become the Davidic dynasty are going to descend from her, through an elaborate trickery, she manages to work in such a way that Yehuda gets her pregnant. And 3 months later, when she becomes visibly pregnant, Yehuda is about to take her out to be burned, and she says the things that he gave her at the time, signet ring and other things. She said, I'm pregnant by this man. And then he says, realized what he hadn't done, and says that she's more righteous than I am. It then goes on to the story of Yosef being sold to Potiphar. He was extremely handsome, and Potiphar's wife was trying to seduce him, because that was the way of the Egyptian women then. Plus, it was a very immoral nation. Plus, she saw that they were going to have a common descendant, and being a typical Egyptian, she figured that was the way to create that common descendant. It was actually in next week's parsha going to be discussed how there's a common descendant between them. She tries seducing him. He escapes. She keeps his garment, then tells her husband that what he did. Now, he didn't believe it, so he was in a very difficult bind. He didn't want to execute him because he was very useful, so he instead sent him to prison. He was also the master of the prisons, and Yosef was favored by God. Everything he did worked well, so he became, in effect, the chief administrator. Two of Pharaoh's servants are sent there because he fell into disfavor. And one of those servants is a chief wine pourer of Pharaoh, and the other one is the baker. He interprets their dreams, and they both come true. The wine server is restored to his position, and the baker is executed. And he then says twice to the server, please tell Pharaoh that I'm here falsely and that I can interpret dreams. He says it twice. Because of that, somebody at his level should have assumed God was going to take care of that and not beg some human. So therefore, he was kept in the prison for an extra 2 years. That's why when it says Mikates in the next parsha, it means at the end of precisely 2 years. Now, what I'd like to focus on are the first two verses of the parsha. And these two verses read as follows in part, and the rest of this commentary is partially based on the Orach Chaim HaKodesh and Likutei Torah and Likud Torah. And it starts, Ve'yeshev Yaakov be'eretz Meguri Avav be'eretz Canaan. First sentence, Elotus Toledot Yaakov Yos ben Sheva Esrim Shana. Now, why are these two pasukim, as I asked before, needed? What does the word Yoshev? It can mean settle, but it can also mean be settled, to be at peace, to be at tranquility. And as the Orach Chaim explains, that was Yaakov's big mistake, that he wanted that kind of peace and tranquility because he had had previous challenges in his life. And what did he do? He faced those. Now he's saying he wants tranquility. There is no total tranquility and peace in this world. And because he asked for something that he shouldn't have, all of the events of Yosef being sold and all the events that came out of that, and Yaakov for over 20 years not knowing that whether Yosef was dead or alive, arose from that because he shouldn't have been taking such a position. Yet he did. And that's one meaning of it. Now, another meaning, why do we say that it's Yosef? What happened to the 11 brothers? The other fact of what happened to the 11 brothers is Yosef was the most similar to Yaakov. In fact, in the Midrash, it describes Rabbah. It describes 24 similarities, things where Yaakov and Yosef were the same. To give just one example, and this happens only to very special high individuals, Yaakov was born circumcised. He did not need a brit milah, circumcision, and neither did Yosef. So that's an explanation based on drash. In other words, an extended meaning, but not the Peshat. I've already given you that one. Now, there's another question that remains here but it goes deeper than that. Yosef was supposed to be the Yesod. He is the fundamental one. Yesod means foundation, the underlying principle, and that was his destiny to be that. It happened in the way it did because of the actions of his brothers, his father, and his brothers. Now, the brothers, by what they did, they created a pagam in the higher world, spiritual worlds, an impurity, a stain of evil. And because they did that and created all these situations which led to us being exiled in Egypt, it was the final chance for us to avoid that fate with all the slavery and things that are going to come up subsequently in Sefer Shemot. For that reason, they did not merit being named. Now, another interesting explanation that is given on this is, why does it say that Yosef, it says, Elu Toldot Yaakov, Yosef ben Sheva. Now, if you take the first Hebrew letter of each one of those words, you get Aleph, Tav, Yud, Bet, and Shin. Now, what is it coming to tell us? Ati Yavash literally means it became dry. Now, what became dry? There's a heavenly river above. It's not to be understood in physical terms. It's not water in the sense we understand it. It's a spiritual concept, an incorporeal concept based on our corporeal concept of a river. And it says, so what happened? He explains that the Nahar Elyon, which it provides many things on this level, universe, physical universe, was destroyed, Yercharav, and Yavash, and it was dried out. And that was all because of the action of the brothers. And it's also a hint that he was in fact a tzaddik himself, Yosef, unlike the other brothers. And he was the foundation above, and by doing that, they caused great damage. And why do we have to tell him he's 17? What possible relevance does that have to anything? Now, Yud Zion is 17 in Hebrew. It has the value of 17. Yud is 7, and 10, and Zion is 7. Well, if you look at it, that is the equivalent, the gematria of Tov is Tet Vav Beis, which is also 17, and it's telling us that Yosef was good, he was positive, and it's a remez that he was the highest, he was a yesod, a foundation for the world above. He was a tzaddik, and that is the other meaning here. Now, I would like to everybody wish a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom, but before I do, I'd like to add one little point that even though things seem dark here, with Yosef being sold, and even whole strange relationship between Yehuda and Tamar, everything is ultimately for the good. Hashem loves us and cares about us, even though we sometimes find to understand why certain things have to be done. And that, in light of the events going on today, we still have to realize that everything that is happening is for the good. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.